Nodevember 2020, Day 6, Drawing. Today I will try to explain again my node tree, as this was a little bit simpler than the previous days. So I created this. This is basically a mesh, which is generated by parametric equations again, and then shaded like drawn with a pencil. Yeah, so let's get right into it. So first of all, I want to say this is for the shape here, and I did multiple shapes, for example this and this, and I won't get into that today, as I did that in the previous videos already, especially the sphere coordinates. I actually optimized that a little bit, so you can use these vector rotate to make sphere coordinates very simple. Yeah, okay. So let's get into it. Yeah, there are multiple layers to this texture. The first layer is obviously these lines, which are just the lines of the geometry. I did make sure to not subdivide the geometry too much, so you can still have only very limited lines and you clearly see them. So here is the wireframe node. That's making the wireframe. And I did the whole thing in a way that white is where the stroke is and black is where there's nothing. And at the end I flipped it. So let's not get confused there. Then we need a mask, because this is obviously not how lines usually look when you draw them. They will always be a little bit more less precise, right? These are completely precise lines. So what I did is create a Voronoi texture here, like this, and using my old trick with the color, I got this. So distance added with a number, in this case 0.4, but negative, and then a greater than node with the color, and then you get something like this. And then I multiplied that, so it looks kind of like this. It's a little bit chopped up, right? That looks a little bit better in my opinion for pencil strokes. Then the next layer is the shading. No, not the shading. The general color, that it's a little bit gray, right? So this. And for this thing, there's a little bit more to cover, but actually it's very simple again. The only thing I did is, first of all, produce this map. So it needs to be striped in some direction. So we obviously use Voronoi again, but for the input, we want to stretch the, oh, that's strange. We want to stretch the coordinates, which you can't see here. And to do that, we add to the original position. We have the original position right here, and then we add something on top, which stretches it in that direction. And the thing we add is basically just a dot product of the camera vector. So the camera vector is this thing. This is always relative to the camera. It's always 1 on the z coordinate, I think, or it's a depth. I don't remember. But we are only interested in x and y, as we want these lines to go like this, diagonally. So the dot product here will give us a value that's where is it? Wait, let's view that. That's more clear than explaining it. 0.1, and let's see. There we go. So it's low in the bottom right corner, high in the top left corner. And then we multiply that a little bit more and add that to the position. and by connecting this way, just a value to a vector, it will basically do the same thing as, and I don't have a combine here, the same thing as connecting this to all of these, to all of those, and then connecting that to that. It's the same thing, really, as you can see. If I delete this, yep, it's the exact same thing. Then we have our skewed texture coordinates, and then we use two Voronoi textures. One for the colors, and one for the distance to the edge of the Voronoi cell. The cells are actually exactly the same if you have the same scale and the same randomness, and the same option here, that's also important. And then we multiply those. So we get the distance here. This is 0 at the borders of the cells, and not 1, but some value in the center. And now we multiply that depending on the cell brightness, basically. It's just, again, color to value that makes it the brightness of the color. Then we get this, which is interesting already. Yeah, better than this, obviously. And this branch, we can skip that for now. We basically mix them. So we basically mix now this thing with this thing. And we make sure to multiply this by a large number and subtract a little bit from it again, and then clamp it. So it will have these black regions and the white regions, and in between there's not that much. It's just those two. And yeah, then add that. We have this layer of detail already. The next layer is a little bit of shading. So I wanted these concentric lines, and that was a little bit more difficult. So this is a node setup for that. In comparison to this, yeah, that's a little bit more difficult, but it's still fine. If you look at the Voronoi texture, it's now screwed or spiraling around the center here in concentric circles. And the same is true for the texture coordinates, where that comes from. So let's take a look at those. So what I did here is use the camera coordinates again, and then scale them depending on the angle, so the facing, this thing, depending on this. So the normal, basically, of the object. Depending on that, scale it, and I can remove the scale for now, and we can see what happens. And then rotate it. Rotating again, depending on the normal. So further out is more rotation, because it's brighter here. Okay, let's see. So if I don't scale it, it looks like this. And then I put that in, scaling, and it makes it much more uniform. In the center here it's a little bit weird, but I think it looks kind of okay in the final result. So that's fine. And I use this power node here to control the distribution. Yeah, so you can see if I go positive, I can make it like really only on the borders, or I can go negative and have a lot of detail in the center and not so much at the borders. And just found that this value works well. Okay, let's continue. So that's the Voronoi coordinates. Next thing is the shading. So I use the true normal because I think that looks a little bit better in this case. And then the dot product with some number, some vector, You can adjust the lighting like this. And then it's remaps that basically to some other values. I usually use these multiply add nodes for that. Inverted, 1 minus. Oh, actually I can remove the clamp there. Okay, and then the important bit. This is the color. This is that. Now compare these two numbers. We get that. The important bit here is not everything here is white, but only the cells which have a greater luminosity than this value. And they get rarer, they get rarer here, wait, smaller. So in here there are less colors which are darker, less colors which are darker than this value, so we get less stripes here. Okay, and then I use this distance again and faded it out, so the cells are always fading out to the edge. Then, oh yeah, why did I do that then? Yeah, probably to split up the cells. So if you would just use this without this, then you would have cells which are connected, and I didn't want that. Yeah, and then multiply and goes into the main chain. So we can look at that. It looks like this, and that looks beautiful in my opinion, but I did want a little bit more. So, oh, and also I did make sure that it's not completely black, because it's never completely black. A pencil stroke, I meant. Yeah, and in the last step, I decided this is not enough, because I wanted Klein Bottles also, and I animated this a little bit. So let's see. Okay, there's my Klein Bottle. And the problem with this is you can't see these inner geometry stuff there. And the way I got around that is by using a transparent shader, but then you can see the back face, which I didn't cover this, but in here I just adjusted the value, the darkness of this texture, depending on if it's back facing or not. So now you can see both sides, and that's messing this up. Can't see clearly in here. So I made sure that you can't see the back side, just the front side. And in here that's actually the back side in this portion, but you can't really tell because it's similar. Yeah, and that's how the thing is created. Hope you enjoyed.